o'clock on March 18th. On the first order of the agenda, we have to approve the minutes from the November 12th, 2025 meeting. Can I have a motion on that?
Second.
All right, all approve, all in favor? All right, okay. And next, we're gonna go through the audit draft, so I will turn it over to Margaret.
We'll have a quick presentation and just a quick little summary of how we ended the year with the audited results versus what you saw for the December financials last week. On the first page is our change in unrestricted working capital. You can see our cash improved by almost $4.4 million. Our working capital improved by $1.6 million, which is our cash receivables less our unrestricted payables. Our operating results, we were 5% ahead of last year, 2024. Can't say last year anymore, 2025 over 2024. Airfield and terminal revenues decreased due to we have the airline revenue sharing that gets offset against revenue. So airfield and terminal, because we had such a high revenue share for the airlines, that offsets against revenues. So our revenues were down in airfield and terminal. Concessions and ground transportation were higher due to the increase in payments and the parking rate increase. Operating expenses, we were able to keep expenses at only a 2% growth. So we had a 5% growth in revenues and a 2% growth in expenses. Even within that, slight 2% growth, most of it was in personnel services, employee benefits, which we would expect and anticipate that every year anyways. Then utilities increased due to both usage and a cost per kilowatt hour. Next page is the ending auditor results at the very bottom. You can see our increase in net position increased by $6 million. The two driving factors of that were the increase in capital contributions of almost $4.3 million and an increase in those results before depreciation, which is the difference of the revenues less expenses. The next page, I just highlight what I just said about the increase in net position for 25 compared to 24. Our bonds decreased by $7.6 million, so we're down to just a little over $40 million in outstanding bonds. Our debt service coverage ratio, which we need to maintain 1.25%, and we're at 2.63. And our capital assets after depreciation increased by $38 million, mainly due to the construction projects we have going on now. The last page, we're at the airline use and lease agreement settlement. So the net revenues we had to share between the airport and the signatory carriers was just $12.7 million. So half of that gets credited to the airlines, and then our half we deposit into the development fund, less the cost of the airline incentives that we do not share with the airlines. We had settlement of the rates, which settlement of the landing fee, terminal rental rate, apron rate, loading bridges, and apron. They resulted in another close to $3 million credit back to the airlines. So we have a credit sitting on our books right now, $9.3 million. Yeah.
There's something I can't reconcile in my head, which doesn't take much. Airfield revenues went down.
Right.
Payments were at record levels.
Right.
So what led to the airfield revenues going down?
So the airfield and the terminal, it's a little tricky the way we do it. When we had that revenue sharing that I just talked about in the back page, that $6.3 million that we're sharing with the airlines, we have to decrease revenues. And what we do is we decrease the airfield and the terminal revenues. So the more we share, the airfield and terminal rentals and fees go down.
And I may have missed it, but why so much of a gain in ground transportation? Is that parking?
Parking, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Harold, do you have any questions for Margaret?
Sorry, I was unmuted. I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
So turn it over to you guys.
All right. So I'm gonna not really flip through the whole packet because I think that can get cumbersome. So I'm gonna try to just run through all of the different communications and reports and certainly, jump in if you have questions as we go. I think it's easier to kind of answer those questions as we go through than to stop and come back to it at a later point. So the first items that I want to talk about would be two separate communications. And when you see the reports from us, they would be titled the AUC 260 communications. So there's one that relates to the authority audit itself. And then there's one that relates to the OPEB trust, or where your retiree health insurance trust fund is held. And since that's an audit, that also requires that separate communication letter. So I'm going to talk about them together, and then I'll highlight the differences between them as we go through. So those letters let you know that we audited the financial statements, both of the authority and of the separate OPEB trust financial statements. Our responsibility is to form and express an opinion about whether those financial statements are free from material misstatement. Free from material misstatement is based on reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. So we're not looking at everything that happens, or certainly we wouldn't be sitting here on March 18th to have a meeting. It would take significantly longer to go through the audit process. But we're using our professional judgment to perform a risk assessment and then plan and perform procedures that are responsive to those areas of risk. As part of that, we consider your internal control processes. We don't provide an explicit opinion on your internal controls, communicate anything that we feel is necessary to be communicated to those charged with governance. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. We did perform the audits consistent with the plan, timing, and scope, so there was really no change in timing or scope of either of those audits through the process. We're required to communicate significant risks to you. Those are not a result of anything that the authority is or is not doing. Those are really just areas that we spend more time and attention through the audit process. Our standards require that management override of internal controls and revenue recognition be considered significant risks. So those are two of them. That really relates to the fact that if you have a good system of internal controls, but there's a way for management to circumvent those controls, you would want to know about that as those charged with governance. And then revenue recognition for the propensity to make yourself look healthier than you are. And then other significant risks really related to your compliance audits. So your federal award single audit that we do, the state transportation assistance audit, and then the passenger facility charge compliance audit. There's significant compliance with all three of those. So we spend a lot of time in the audit process looking at those areas. No changes in accounting standards or policies this year. So, it feels like the first time in a while, there hasn't been any significant changes. So what that tells you is there's really, if you're looking at this year compared to last year, there's nothing that changed at a standard level that would make you not be consistent. Significant estimates. So all financial statements have estimates. The most significant estimates to the authority relate to your pension liability, which is part of the state pension plan. The state pension plan has an actuary. They provide you with information related to that, which you're required to record your proportionate share of that activity. The other post-employment benefits liability, which is that retiree health, another actuarial calculation. And then leases. So as I'm sure you're aware, you have a lot of lease activity between various concessionaires and other vendors. So some of those determinations on how to value those assets and liabilities and revenues, take some estimating and some significant assumptions go into that. As part of our process, we consider those things and we determine that they're reasonable in relation to the financial statements. We had no uncorrected misstatements and we had no material corrected misstatements. So what that tells you is that the information that we're receiving is accurate. We're not taking and adjusting things significantly to turn it into, what you see here in the final product. We had no disagreements with management. Management will sign a representation letter stating that they were truthful, accurate, and honest, provided us all the information we requested. And then there's really nothing else required to be communicated in that communication. So overall, those required communications, everything's very standard, communication, nothing, out of the ordinary or things to be concerned with in that regard. Okay, so the actual reports themselves, inside of the large ACFR document, you have a number of different reports. So I'm going to just kind of go through in summary form those. The first is the audit report on the authority itself. And so I'm sure the big question here, right, is how do we do? We did, or we will be issuing an unmodified opinion, which is, that clean opinion, highest level of assurance that we can provide that says we do believe your financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. There's some additional language in that report that talks about our responsibility, which I more or less just covered with you, management's responsibilities. You do have some other information inside of that annual comprehensive financial report. So there's required supplementary information, which is items that are required by the standards. There's supplementary information, which is usually required by somebody else or just other information that you find to be useful to your stakeholders. And then there's other information in your financial statements. And that's really more the introductory section, the biographies, things of that nature. Our assurance the same level of assurance doesn't extend to that other information and the supplementary information that we provide on the main financial statements. You also have a report in here related to the concession, the customer facility charges, which related to years ago improvements in the car rental facility. So there's a section of state law that requires you to have some work performed over that. Really, at this point, you haven't had activity since that initial project. So your only real requirement is to maintain that cash in a restricted cash account, which you have done. So our report says that you're in compliance with that requirement.
Real quick, just so committee members know, that's that 116. It's towards the back end. It's just you're looking for that letter itself.
What was that?
The letter, the report that he's talking about, it's all towards the end. So this one that he was just about, the fast facility charges, starts at 116. So you're like, you got to go way back.
Okay, so then the next report would be our report in accordance with government auditing standards. So this report, again, lets you know that we audited the financial statements. We consider your internal controls. We don't provide an opinion on your internal controls. However, if we encounter a material weakness or significant deficiency, we bring those items to you and report those. So we do have one item to report as a significant deficiency, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. That's referred to in that report, but as it relates to compliance, no findings related to non-compliance. So that finding, the significant deficiency, was related to agreements with cargo airlines. As part of the work that we do, we generally look to see the signed agreements with various entities that you conduct business. And there were 3 that we were unable to be provided with a signed copy of a current agreement with those airlines. So just an item that, certainly with larger, rental payments and things of that nature, you want to be up to date on those agreements. There was FedEx, UPS.
The biggest ones, we don't have some.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they all expired within the year last year, I think, or at least.
They're holdovers, so we took over the cargo.
Okay.
Is that being negotiated now? Peter?
I haven't been asked about this until this moment. So when we took over the cargo facility, Michael, as the CFO, was handling negotiations. I've been in contact with FedEx over a different related matter where they're trying to expand their footprint. But
This
is the first I've heard.
Yeah,
2026 project.
Yeah, I think I recall. I remember Michael maybe was telling me he was preparing counsel on that before.
Right, but
So,
it was,
yes.
somebody had offered to reach out to them and take care of that for me, so.
Well, that's a project we'll have to get on for this year then.
So, I mean, you're still, I mean, they're obviously using the space. You're still being paid. The reason it came to our attention is a couple of them hadn't paid in a few months. It turns out that ended up being related to an unrelated issue with a change in payment systems. But that
Also
did come to
payment
our
this week?
attention. So, and all the other pieces prevented that from being a more significant finding, right? That you do have mitigating things in place to protect against, complete non-payment or things like that. But certainly, would be best practice to have current signed agreement with those entities. Okay, so then the other compliance reports related to the federal awards, the state assistance, and the passenger facility charges. So the scope of our work is similar, but rather than auditing for material, the financial statements being materially correct, we're looking at material compliance, right? Did you comply with the different requirements of those programs? And for all of those, we do believe that you complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements that you're required to follow, and we have no findings to report in any of those areas. So again, that's passenger facility charges, your state transportation assistance, and your federal awards. Separately, again, I mentioned the OPEB trust, so we do have a separate audit report in those financial statements. Again, another unmodified opinion, that clean opinion, highest level of assurance that we can provide there that says we believe those financial statements are fairly presented. And then there's an additional report in accordance with government auditing standards that, again, goes through our considerations of internal controls, and we have no findings to report related to the OPEB trust. So I know I went through that kind of briefly. I tried to lump the similar things together to not be flipping back and forth between pages. Really, what it boils down to is reportable findings in writing is really just that one item related to the signed agreements. Otherwise, very clean, smooth process. Big thank you to Margaret and team for providing us all the information. Certainly not a small undertaking, so we appreciate everybody's cooperation, and happy to answer further questions if there are any.
Anything from you, Janet? Harold, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Good report, thank you.
All right. So.
My clean opinion.
We like them too.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, since this is good, so I'm going to move that we move the 32nd Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, ACFR. I'm just going to point out this is everything here in this binder. So, but for minutes purposes, so the 32nd Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for the year ending on December 31st, 2025. The 2025 Rates and Charges Settlement Report, the Authority 2025 Annual Investment Report, the Annual 2025 Review and Approval of the Cash Management and Investment Policy, Review of the Mission Statement and Performance Measures and Acceptance of Measure Reports, and the Section 2800 of the Public Authorities Law, and financial statements for 2025 for the OPEB trust be moved to the full board with a positive recommendation. Second by Janet. All in favor? All right, perfect. All right, so all right. And then, so one last thing, I would like to move into executive session to discuss the history of the employment of a particular person for executive session. Can I get a second on that? Okay. All right, all in favor?
But I want to extend that to different corporations.
Particular corporation? Okay, good, as well. All right. So all in favor, we're good? Thank you, guys. It's just going to be the auditor, so everybody else can leave. Thank you. Harold?